Which brings me to something for you, Matt. We've seen either 3 or 4 Big Ten games out of each team now. Is there anything in particular that strikes you? And I'll lead it in this way. What strikes me, and maybe this is just because I posted a Big Ten power rankings early this morning, I believe it was, that, man, I think Ohio State's the best team in the conference. Obviously, Oregon's going to have much to say about that coming up on Saturday. So maybe Oregon's going to be the best team in the conference, and Ohio State's going to slot in it too. And then Penn State, regardless of what happens, and most likely they win Saturday and they stay at 3 in people's minds. But you and I are all about the results, of course. But, man, I look at that 4 to 13, 10 teams in this conference. I didn't think I was going to put USC. I thought that they were going to be a notch above, kind of in their own category there under Ohio State and Oregon, with Penn State, let's say. But, man, I look at these matchups. Rutgers beat Washington. Washington beat Michigan. Michigan beat Minnesota. Minnesota beat USC. Michigan beat USC. You know, it seems like you've got Illinois beat Nebraska. It seems like Indiana's beating everyone at this point. You know, it'll be interesting to see if that continues. We've got like 10 teams in that mid-tier that seem to be almost interchangeable. They come in different shapes and sizes, but they're interchangeable.
Totally agree. It's a big jumble right now. You know, like some seasons you see a number of teams clearly rising above the rest. You don't have that right now. And obviously what you're going to see with Penn State, USC, and especially Ohio State, Oregon, that's going to give us a lot more information. It's going to give us a lot more context in terms of how the Big Ten shakes up. But right now, yeah, it's extremely fluid. And also these games are close, and they're also close to the vest. Like, I think that's another Big Ten talking point, that so far, you know, we wondered, would like the Pac-12 newcomers make the conference more wide open, or would the old guard, you know, be able to play its style of football? So far, it's the old guard of the Big Ten being able to play its style of football. The West Coast in newcomers, they're not pitching it around the ballpark and putting up video game numbers. Just hasn't worked out that way. One interesting point is that, you know, is that travel item that I mentioned earlier from John Wilner about teams that are making these long distance commutes not faring very well. And it's kind of interesting that, you know, we heard so many coaches at Big Ten Media Day say, well, we've consulted the NFL teams and the NFL experts. Wait a minute. NFL athletes and college athletes are on different schedules. They have different life demands. You know, if you're a professional athlete, you just have to, you know, prepare yourself to play a game. These college athletes, they have NIL, they have their studies, they have their girlfriends. You know, it struck me as hilarious. Wait a minute. Why are you consulting NFL people? It's not the same experience. It's not the same frame of reference. So, you know, I just have to scratch my head and wonder in bafflement why the NFL was seen as like the gold standard. Those guys are used to the travel. Those guys are used to the rigors of the sport, not the college athletes. Like, USC should be getting into these Big Ten road locations as early as realistically possible. You shouldn't be flying in late. Like, sleep in the same Minneapolis hotel bed 2 nights in a row before you play your game. You know, sleep in the same foreign environment a couple nights in a row. Don't be parachuting in at the last minute. Like, that just seems so misguided. So it seems that, like, you know, just coaches in general, I'm not focusing on West Coast coaches specifically, because like Eastern teams going west, they're also having a problem. But just, it seems as though everyone's getting used to this new world, and that seems to be affecting the offenses. It seems to be creating a situation where, you know, you're not seeing the full dynamism, the full athleticism of various offensive players fully take root. These pieces aren't being put together as well as they could be or should be. I mean, that's not just a USC thing. It does apply to USC, but like, you're seeing it throughout the conference. I mean, the one guy who's really knocking it out of the park, we can agree, Kurt Signetti. The Sig is lit in Bloomington. You know, the way he is just putting everything together for the Hoosiers. Like, he looks like a rock star. I mean, now we can discuss like who should be the next Florida Gator head coach, and obviously Lane Kiffin's going to be bandied about. If I'm in Gainesville and Lane Kiffin says no, Kurt Signetti is right there at the top of my list. If that was me, I'm speaking only for myself. So, but in general, like it seems as though this Big Ten season, we're waiting to see it take off, because we've seen close games, but close games that are a function of parity, close games that are a function of neither team being so good that it can gain separation. It's not these meetings on the mountaintop, you know. It's not like an epic battle where two teams are both bringing their 100-mile-an-hour fastball on the outside corner, and it's just, you know, slugging it out and haymakers are being thrown. No, it's games that are close because neither team can really separate itself. It's like the Isner Mahou Wimbledon tennis match. Like both guys' returns of serve were absolute garbage. That's why you got 70-68 in the fifth set. This Big Ten season, with all these close games, feels much the same way. Like USC Minnesota, it was not this epic battle. It was a pillow fight. And as soon as USC lost Anthony Lucas, like that, again, that was the tipping point for that defense. You like held the fort without Gentry and Bear Alexander, but you lose Anthony Lucas in addition to that, and you don't get enough help from your offense to get a 20-10 lead or a 24-10 lead, and it remained a one-score game. USC put itself in jeopardy, put itself in position to lose. So, yeah, the Big Ten is just a big jumble right now, and we'll see if mid-October gives us the beginnings of some separation and some, like a first tier, a second tier, a third tier. But right now, it's just a really, really big jumble.
I think Ohio State and Oregon have that chance to deliver that epic matchup. What we saw last week out of Ohio State is Iowa being on the upper end of that jumbled mess. Ohio State just, and Oregon against Michigan State, just when all these other games, as you note, are just these 20-17 rock fights. Those are the two teams that seem to be clamping down now on all their opponents. And, of course, they'll get together. That should be fascinating. Matt, I'm sure you will appreciate this. I believe you will. Is I took the AP to task here. I started to look over the AP because a number of people had brought this to my attention, a number of rankings flaws, as is typical every week. And I'm looking through some of these rankings, and they make absolutely no sense, of course. That's, of course, why we do our top 25. That actually makes sense. It's based on the results. Michigan and Washington. This is just one example of many. Michigan and Washington, they just played Saturday. Washington wins by 10 points. They're both 4-2. Washington lost to Rutgers because they missed 3 field goals. Not that that's an excuse. That's part of the game. But let's understand evaluation of play. They lose to Washington State because they get stopped at the goal line inside the 5. You know, Michigan, one of their wins is a really ugly hang on to the side of the cliff against Minnesota. And Michigan's number 21 in the country, and Washington's barely receiving votes, back 13 or 14 spots from Michigan. They just played Saturday.
Absolute crazy pants. Absolute crazy pants. And I mean, what is the reason for that? We all know that. Michigan's reputation. Michigan was national champion last year. I mean, Michigan was number 10 going into that game. Yeah. And there's no way Michigan was a top 10 team going into that game. And of course, with USC losing a second time, like, that should devalue Michigan's resume. But again, it's reputation, right? It's so baked into how voters process and handle these rankings week to week. It's really rather ridiculous.
Yeah, you can't tell me that Missouri's struggling against a Boston College team and winning by less than a touchdown and beating Vandy in overtime, and then getting completely annihilated by Texas A&M should be still in the rankings, but they're in the rankings because they started in the rankings.
That's right. There's not a lot of meat on the bone for Missouri's resume, but yeah, because they were number 9, we can't knock them fully out of the top 25. Wait a minute. Is that some kind of rule? Is that some kind of law or statute? Yep, it's this is how it's done, and it just makes the two of us absolutely insane every time it happens.